Hello and welcome to 60 Minutes or Less, a podcast from Birthday Cake for Breakfast. I'm Andy Hughes, and for episode 50, it's a treat to feature an interview with Deerhoof Sticksman Greg Saunier. Swift intro this week as it's a big one. We got into it deep with Greg back in May 2025, not long after the release of the new Deerhoof album, Noble and Godlike in Ruin, out April 2025 via Joyful Noise Recordings. If you like the episode, let us know. Follow us on your favourite streaming platform and follow Birthday Cake for Breakfast on all the socials. Right, on to Greg Saunier. Enjoy. You've just come back off your short run of tour dates, haven't you? So are you back?
Well, you may consider it short, but it's like for the drummer, who's playing an hour and a half every night, I get duly exhausted by the end. But you're right, it was pretty short. The one that we have coming where we're coming to you is quite a bit longer.
Yeah. And obviously
Uh,
flights are, yeah, much
yeah.
longer. But you've said of the rehearsals ahead of tour before you started off on the 31 Flavors tour that it can
Exactly.
be it can be exhausting, mainly mentally and emotionally rather than physically.
Are you pulling this from my mind? Where are you getting this information?
You've got a sign right behind you that's got this all written down.
Yeah.
But no, so rather than the physical, and now I appreciate, like you say, with the drumming, you are the physical aspect of it. But how do you find that period before tour and getting ready to go?
In a way, I think that my answer is a tactless answer to the only people who are likely to read or listen to this interview, which is probably fans of the band. I think that might be actually my favorite. My favorite musical activity is the rehearsal leading up to the tour. That's when it's like the first day we all like finish practice so depressed, like, oh my God, we do not remember how to play anything, not even our instruments. It's not just the repertoire. It's like, what are these weird, like, like pieces of wood in my hand? I don't know what I'm supposed to do with them. Everything's so stiff and awkward, and we sound terrible. And we're like, how did we ever think the four of us were a good band of people to try and play music together? Then day two, like with nothing happening in between other than going to sleep and then waking up again, like suddenly we're like way better. And it always happens like that. It's just sleep on it once and suddenly it's like like that first day you can go as hard as humanly possible and it will never sound good. But then something happens in your sleep and in your dreams that you're continuing to rehearse it somehow, and you're some part of your nervous system is still wrapping its head around what it is you're trying to do, and things that were problems are suddenly solved. It's like magic. um, and then it's like, here guys, I made a set list, and we try, and it's like, that does not flow at all. And it's like, okay, well, let me try another one. We'll try this one this afternoon. We try that. It's like, it's getting closer. And then it's like, maybe day three or something. It's like you suddenly find it. It's like, wait, that actually worked. You know, like 90 minutes went by and it felt like about 15. Everything's flowing. We always have our little quibbles over like tones and stuff like that. It's like, oh, those guitar needs more mids, or like I can't I you're hurting my ears, but I can't even hear what you're playing, or it's like, oh, there's too much reverb, there's too much distortion, or there's not enough, or all this kind of stuff. And just like one problem after another, and they're all tiny, each one gets solved, you know? And it's like there's no like one thing that makes you ready. It's just a million tiny decisions, each of which may seem insignificant by itself. It's like, man, these people are obsessed, control freaks and micromanaging nitpickers. But it's like it all adds up. It's like once you do 100 of those tiny things, suddenly it's like, whoa, this is actually smoking. There's just a way that when it's just us, and we're just playing, this time we were playing in John's basement in Minneapolis, and it's just like we laugh a lot, and if the song breaks down, it breaks down, and we giggle for a while and make jokes. And it's like we're in such a tiny room. In a way, I think the band never sounds better than when it's just like crammed into this tiny space and everything's so intimate. And like there's many, many rock clubs on this planet that I think are so fun to play, and we sound great in, and all bands sound great in, and they're just the perfect size and stuff like that. But still, there's something about playing in a basement for just yourselves. You can feel your morale growing, minute by minute. And it's like, it's kind of an amazing process. I think that, like, particularly on this tour, because it had been a while since we had toured, it's been maybe a 9 months break or something. That feeling of still figuring it out maybe continued over into like the first 3 or 4 shows. I felt like by the fourth show we were like really on a roll. And yeah, the first couple we were still like, oh, I don't know if that works, stuff like that. Still kind of rehearsing, like we'd test stuff out at sound check.
It is good to have that scrappiness, though, isn't it? You know.
Well, I mean, you're not gonna have our band without that. I mean, the best shows, the ones where like all four of us agree, like, okay, now that was a good show. Like we really nailed it on that one. It's not because they weren't scrappy. It's probably because they were more scrappy and just everybody was like on one, just taking risks and like playing something really surprising.
So
I love
with
that.
like you've been together for so long and you've been touring for so long. I know you said you have like these micro
Mm.
things that build up into a huge, have you got any like go-tos that you all have where you can click in together, or is it literally just stuff that you can grab out of thin air?
I mean, that is such a reasonable question, and you would think that obviously the answer would be yes. And yet, it's like, I'm telling you, every time we try to get together again, it feels like we are starting from scratch, just like reinventing the wheel and like I'm sure by the time rehearsals end, we can probably list some things that sound like constant refrains, like Greg's asking for more mids on the guitar again. That's kind of like broken record thing. But as it's happening, it really all feels like complete discovery. Like I was saying, it's like, what are these two pieces of wood in my hand? I don't know what I'm supposed to do with this. And I don't know if it's a blessing or a curse, but that seems to be something that's constant in our band. And it doesn't apply only to rehearsals, it applies to writing songs, it applies to recording, mixing. It just, every time, it's like, man, you'd think we would have developed some kind of system by now, or a method, but we're just like making it up as we go along, really.
Do you think that kind of helps with the longevity of the band rather than get to
Maybe.
like album three and you're like, shit, that's it now.
We've set the mold, and now we just have to pour the molten material into the mold, and then you're done or something. I don't know. That sounds like that might create longevity too. I mean, there'd certainly be less strain and conflict and like stress, but no, you're right. It's like it's rewarding to feel yourself creating, but it's like the first couple steps is always like, ooh, ooh, ah, yeah, I'm a little stiff. I'm a little sore. I don't remember how to do this. That's just it's true physically, but of course, it's also true mentally and sort of, it's not just mental either. It's emotional, and it's like interpersonal. Like we also have to remember how to treat each other, and who requires what amount of gentleness and who requires what amount of firmness. Who gets tired after 4 hours straight of bashing away at the songs, and who gets hangry if they don't have a snack, and this kind of stuff. Like, and we're four really different people with different personalities, and just like, yeah, remembering how the puzzle pieces fit together and stuff.
So on this tour that you've just, well, the tour that you've started, obviously there's more
Yeah,
to
yeah.
there's more. on the horizon.
There's more to come.
So you were two stops in San Francisco.
Right. I mean,
Home.
it wasn't even two stops. It was one stop, but two performances. We didn't, this is unheard of. We didn't even have to sound check the second day. This is what we're doing in London, just to make ourselves feel like queens or something. I don't know, like we can just show up for the gig. We don't have to load in at 3, like drag all the bass amps in there and, fight over the monitor mix and all that kind of stuff and like explain our lighting ideas to the incredulous lighting designer, on staff. It's like day 2, we just kick back. Yeah, we can all get driven in like 4 separate SUVs, and just like walk straight onto the stage and just start playing Jumpin' Jack Flash or something.
But like, that was the homecoming for you in a sense, because
Yes,
where you formed and such.
I know.
The jump between San Francisco in '94 to now must be quite dramatic, I imagine.
We were talking about that exact topic nonstop while we were there because, yeah, in our minds, of course, the narrative, that has so much to do with the collapse of human society is that a place like San Francisco is sort of the capital of the destruction. You can sort of point your finger to places like Washington, D.C., San Francisco, Bay Area, Silicon Valley, and a few other places, maybe a headquarters at Tel Aviv or something like that, where it's like these are the places from which the termination of our species is being plotted because it's good business. Yeah, it's such a cliche, like, oh my God, San Francisco has gotten so expensive and it's overrun with tech bros, and it's like a completely robotic, like AI simulation or something now. But then you get there and it's like it actually looks exactly the same. There's a few more high rises. All the billboards talk about AI and you want to vomit, but it's like you get into the city, you're at your friend's house, you go to the venue, it still smells like urine. There's still, it's still like there's musicians around with a scene and they're trying to do things and they're really supportive of each other. It's still very, you know, sort of genre agnostic. People are very open there and not they don't seem to form into cliques, where it's like, well, I only listen to metal and I only go to metal shows, or I'm only into reggae or something like that. Like, people are just like into it. And I mean, a great example of that feeling was, with 2 shows, we had a total of 4 openers that we got to choose. And each of them so different from the next. One was a full on hardcore, everything fast thrash, with just the most intensely screamed vocals, everything super tight. Another band was extremely experimental kind of noise rock that never had a beat. And the singer was like a kind of dancer, and she was very like aggro with the audience in such an interesting way. And our audience, of course, the front row was like little kids. It was an all-ages show, and she just had no fear about like messing with these little kids and stuff who loved it. Then there was a kind of a really quiet singer songwriter that did kind of like Latin flavored music, a lot of it in Spanish. And then there was a band that that existed when Deerhoof formed that we got to reunite. I mean, it was like costume noise music that was like really heavy influence on early Deerhoof. And in fact, its members it's almost like they were legends, underground legends in the Bay Area before Deerhoof ever started. And they were the people who convinced Satomi, our singer, to move to San Francisco from Japan. And then once she did, she was like looking for activities and looking to make friends and stuff, and they were like, oh well, there's this band Deerhoof, some duo, they really need a singer, maybe you could join. She's like, well, I don't know anything about how to play music, and they were like, perfect, join. And then she joined, and instantly, that was the band, and like, so like in a literal sense is like back to 1994, and they were just the same, everybody was gray and had wrinkles and stuff just like us, but it was like they had stayed so true, you know to their completely ridiculous aesthetic. And it really did feel like there is something in the spirit of San Francisco that has not been lost and need not be grieved. Like people really are still going for it there,
That's good to hear that people are
Yeah.
still, yeah, because
Right.
you could imagine that just pushing everything away, couldn't you, with the gentrification and
Oh my God.
the
I mean,
cars that
it's
drive
just
themselves
housing
and
crisis nonstop. But it was when we lived there too. That's the thing. I mean, we want to pretend that it happened in one specific year where everything went Zuckerberg. But the fact is, even in the 90s, I mean, that we at the time we called it the dot-com boom, the startups. But basically it was the same thing. It was artificially inflated, pie in the sky ideas of how tech was going to save us. And in fact, all it was just a cash grab. And a series of speculative bubbles. Like my startup, I'm about to invent some app, or, they didn't have apps then, but I'm about to invent some application or some program or something that is going to make so much money. And you better, invest your millions into my startup, and then they retire, at age 28 or something like that. That was the cliche. And then it would crash, and then it'd start up again and it'd crash. It's just been going like that the whole time, and it's completely ridiculous. And any concept that is somehow a positive vision for the future, or that it's in any way any kind of salvation, for the modern human being, is like such a joke when you're actually there and watching it play out, and you see the level of idiocy and selfishness and deranged. It's like the story I know about Zuckerberg. He bought up an entire city block in San Francisco. I mean, to buy real estate in San Francisco is not exactly, but when you've got infinity money, you buy up an entire block, which means kicking people out, buying them out. And it turned it in a city block into a compound for himself, in front of which Mark Zuckerberg has an idling SUV 24/7 with a driver sitting there just idling, ready to go, ready to escape should somebody attempt a Luigi or something, on this guy. He's obviously one of the most hated individuals on planet Earth, and rightly so. So he's got his getaway car. He's like a bank robber. He's a good. I just thought that was incredible. Just sit there and let the car just like spew, exhaust into the air, permanently, just in case he has to get away.
while we wash out yogurt pots and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly.
I think I need to get the driver on the podcast. That's the real scam.
Exactly. I know. Find out who this is. I'm going to tune into that. That
Yeah,
will be a coup, a triumph. That will be a podcast triumph. You got to locate that driver. First of all, find out if this urban legend is even true. Start there. But then if it is, find this driver. Do they ever nod off? What do they do in the car?
yeah, God.
They go on Facebook.
Well, yeah. If he is awake the whole time, I'd be scared when he has to start driving. But
Yeah, exactly.
I do want to touch on this in a minute, but I wanted to go back. Am I right in thinking that one of your supports for this tour was someone who was just chopping vegetables? Is that right?
Ah. This person was actually doing it simultaneously with our performance. That was night one in Minneapolis, and we were playing we were playing at a modern art museum, a quite well regarded, top tier, internationally renowned art museum called Walker Art Center. they booked us a show there and like, wow. But they're like, you can't just come in and just play a regular rock show, you know? This is like a theater where they normally have plays. There's some really fancy projector and a screen. There's the curtains. There's, all this stuff. And so we're like racking our brains trying to think of what to do. And normally I carry around, this flash drive right here. Like if there is a projector and a screen at whatever club we're playing, I'll be like, oh, there's a video file on here that you can project while we're playing. And it's like basically drawings of flowers, sort of like scientific drawings of flowers and fruits and maybe like birds and yeah, the occasional Dutch still life is thrown in. I really like the idea of these very calm images that just, one stays there for a whole minute while nothing happens, and then it's just another one. And meanwhile, the music is like so frantic and, chaotic and all over the place. And I feel like these very slow, innocent images take on a strange, sinister quality when paired with the music that I find really interesting. So we were thinking about that. We're like, I know, why don't we get somebody to make a Dutch still life in real life during the concert? And so John, who lives in Minneapolis, he's the local. He just goes on the internet and like looks for basically edible arrangements Minnesota. And literally the first thing that comes up is just this totally freelance woman who does arrangements, flowers, vegetables, fruits, carving, all this stuff. And he wrote to her, it's like, okay, we're a rock band, we're playing at Walker Arts Center, and we want you to carve vegetables while we played. She was convinced this was a joke or a prank or something. It's like, what are you talking about? She'd never done anything like that and never heard of anybody doing anything like that. But we convinced her that we were legit, that we have a website, we're an actual touring band with records and everything. We really want to do it. And it was so fun. I mean, we kind of emailed back and forth a few brainstorms over the couple months leading up to the show, but really so much of it was decided on the spot. She shows up with her family. They drove 2 hours. They lived in the middle of absolute podunk nowhere in Minnesota with all these vegetables and all the materials. And the Walker had set up, a table and a camera that was going to catch it all. And we came up with this idea of like she should be behind the curtain. The camera is pointed at the curtain from behind. So in other words, pointed towards the audience, but there's a curtain in the way. And then the table is there in front of the lens, and she's carving things and setting it onto the arrangement. That will be projected in real time onto the screen that's just above where we're playing. The audience is watching this. I mean, I talked to people afterwards and they're like, oh, cool video. That's kind of funny of carving. But then we came back on for an encore, and that's when we did it. We whoosh, and did the reveal, open up the curtains, and there she is, and there's the camera. And then also everybody can see themselves up on the screen because it's pointed at them, and it was like the coolest reveal. So and Gia, the person who did the arranging, who was doing the labor itself, like she was so happy. She loved it. I mean, it must have been so weird to be doing that while just like 3 feet beyond a curtain, there was this incredibly loud rock band blasting away, that she couldn't see. It just must have seemed so weird to her, but like, yeah, she was like in heaven. She was overjoyed with the whole experience, and so were we. The audience was like blown away. It was so fun. But then, of course, it was like there was like a legal liability, and the Walker was not allowed to feed any of the fruits or vegetables to the audience because it's not zoned for like restaurant code or something like that. So basically, Deerhoof ended up with all the fruits and vegetables that we snacked on for the next several days.
I thought you were going to say that they weren't allowed to physically feed the woman who was doing all the
Yeah,
arranging, which I'm sure
exactly.
she wouldn't want to be physically fed anyway. Strange. From that weirdness to more weirdness from when you were back in the 90s, I read that Nicolas Cage was actually at one of those early shows and
Yeah.
like being a bit of a weird dude, which is, on
He was
brand,
a weird dude, yeah.
and was heckling from the back, and like apparently was asked for bus money or something silly like that. Any
Yeah.
recollection of
I mean,
of
we
that?
had no idea who it was who was shouting at us. We were playing this song. We were playing a song that was like we played frequently at the time, but was not on an isn't not on any of our albums. I think it's called "The Sadness of Here." It ended up as like a B-side to an early version of "Come See the Duck." A total Deerhoof obscurity, but we were playing it live, and there's this one section in the middle where all the music stops and Satomi just does this scream that's completely naked, like it doesn't have anything before or after it, nothing accompanying it. This sort of screaming sound, and then this long gap, And we're playing at the Fillmore. We're opening for Sonic Youth, It's like the biggest show we've ever played in our lives. Unlike when we play it in whatever person's like basement or whatever shows we were used to playing, um, among this giant audience, the silence is not exactly the same thing when you've got a huge crowd of people. And way from the back, like after Satomi screams, we hear this like this sort of like drunken reply, from like that guy or whatever, who's like just wants to be as annoying as possible. When the show was over, we were like, we were on cloud nine, wow, we just played the Fillmore, it's like such a famous venue. We're in the biggest backstage with the biggest rider we've ever seen, we're standing around, palling around with Kim Gordon, Thurston Moore, and like, and just like being friends and having normal conversations with basically, what to us are like gods, And somebody's like, "Oh, what do you think of Nicolas Cage heckling you in that song?" It was like, "What is Nicolas Cage?" Because I guess he's like friends with the band, with the Sonic Youth. But, anyways, that's what we hear, is that it was Nicolas Cage. We never actually talked to him ourselves or spotted him. But then Satomi's roommate was taking the bus home at the end of the show, and Nicolas Cage walked on, and like, he like goes into his pockets and they're all empty. I guess he'd spent it all on beer or something, And so Satomi's roommate gave him $1 for the bus, which is just, like, what a nutcase, So funny. The
Yeah,
stories are so funny.
I like the idea that when you're at a show and you hear someone shouting loudly and you're like, oh, who is that dickhead over
Right.
there? And then you look over and
Exactly.
it's like, oh, it's Nicolas Cage, big actor, has to borrow
Exactly,
money for the bus.
I mean, it makes you think like maybe he's not an actor. Maybe all those characters he play are simply him just with a camera in front of him, developing this persona in real life, sort of like method acting style, like he never goes out of character. And he's going to be leaving Las Vegas or, whatever. Particularly in those years, his roles were always the sort of, kind of out of his mind,
I can imagine this is kind of a silly question, but is it still, so special putting out new releases now, given you're all
Uh-huh.
so experienced at it? Is it still such a special moment just holding a physical copy of a record?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I don't think anyone's ever asked me that, and I have to sort of reflect for a second to because I think that it does not feel the same. I think it's more of a thrill, but I guess it's less of a it feels like a conversation now. I think in the early days we were somewhat hermetic and no one knew who we were, which stands to reason because we were a new band. But also we had a sort of working method that didn't involve a lot of socializing with anyone else. And a big part of that was the fact that we weren't recording with any budget. So we weren't going to recording studios. We didn't have a producer, we didn't have anybody helping. We had no outside input. We had no voice of reason on anything. It was completely sealed off and just working in our own bubble and recording ourselves with very substandard equipment. And the reason that matters is because what you lose in perhaps fidelity, you gain in time to work on it. You've got no deadline. It's like basically, our first couple records, it's like we'd be working on them for 2 years, 4 years, something like that, completely alone. No one else on planet Earth heard 1 second of any of it. It was just us on headphones, on the 4 track, cassette machine, and just listening to it over and over. And so there's this, it's sort of like if you're in your house, like, okay, behind you, you've got maybe those are album covers or posters or something. And it's like, once that has been on your wall for 2 years, you kind of don't see it anymore. It's just like, oh, that's my wall. I mean, you kind of don't notice it. Just the nature of perception is such that it doesn't give you the same stimulation that it did the first time. And so what sounded truly horrible when it was first recorded, doing things like, oh, my bass drum microphone is like half of a pair of broken Walkman headphones or something like that. If you plug headphones into the mic input, that it will actually act as a microphone, but a terrible microphone. But it's like you listen to it enough times and you can't tell anymore. You just can't hear it anymore. You're working on the mix. It just sounds like nothing. To try and create the stimulation for yourself because you're your only audience, you just keep pushing it further. It's like, maybe let's make it a little more distorted. Let's add a little more treble to that guitar, or like, let's edit the song even shorter and then even shorter and then even shorter, because you're not getting a hit from it anymore in a way. And so by the end of this process, you have really only succeeded in having a conversation with your own fatigue and your own boredom and your own limits of perception. And so when the thrill of releasing it out to the world was actually a very odd and sort of sometimes underwhelming and even a little disappointing experience, because when you're living in a cave for 4 years and it's like, okay, here I am, and it's like, meanwhile, the world has moved on. You don't remember how to speak whatever language they're speaking, and it just sort of fizzles, because it doesn't land, for very many people. I mean, really, one of the only people it landed for was that band I was telling you about, those sort of like noise freaks in San Francisco. And they were one of our very, very few supporters in the early days. That and the label, Kill Rock Stars, who were, I think, really going out on a limb, suggesting that we might, do a record. It's kind of crazy thinking back to it, and not something that's likely even then, let alone now, and just how lucky we were and how much patience they had with us. Every album we put out just lose more money and more money, and they're still like, well, let's try it again. It's just like unthinkable in today's economy. I think that the thrill nowadays feels more like we are conversing with people that I don't want to quite say no, but know the way you know some friends and acquaintances. You might not know everything about them. You can't perfectly predict their exact musical taste or anything like that, but you kind of have a sense where they're at, and like, it's like their reaction to the last record helps inform, ooh, well, now let's find a way to surprise them on this record. You know what I mean? If they're describing our previous record in such and such a way, then, ooh, I think I thought of something to do on this record that will be not what they expect. And a very beautiful thing that we've been fortunate enough to experience in our band is no hits. We've never had any hits. So from almost day one, if there were any expectation created among people who liked our band, it was only the expectation that they might be surprised and that we would not pour material into a pre-existing mold, and we would not be a cultural producer that you could sort of count on to do their thing, and I always know Bruce Springsteen's going to sound like Bruce, or whatever. AC/DC is obviously the most cliched example in the universe. It's like, well, you kind of know what you're going to get, and it's like, and there's something so comforting about that, and so really quite beautiful about the total devotion to the same 3 to 4 chords. And it's like, and it was hard to see at the time in the early days, but now I realize what a kind of gift it was that our own audience gave us, which is that they enjoyed the surprise. And so then that pressure on us is actually to not repeat our hit from last year, but actually to try and do something that they didn't expect at all. And it's an incredible, like, creative challenge, sometimes very frustrating and difficult, but ultimately so, like you're asking, thrilling. It's thrilling to, while I was on this tour, I bought a gift, for my partner. And it's like, oh, I know they're going to be surprised, like, and that feeling, that's a thrill too. It's not the first gift I've ever given. That was thrilling. That was more like, oh my God, I'm nervous. My palms are sweaty. And it's like that kind of a thrill, because you're like, I have no idea how this is going to land or if it's going to land. And it often doesn't. But in this case, it's more like you've developed into a rapport and a kind of back and forth. And it's like the privilege of being able to have that long-term conversation with an audience is like, it's kind of staggering, And it's like, ooh, I think we have something this time. People are gonna, this is not what people are gonna be expecting, and I think this is really gonna hit them, and it's gonna land, and of course you never know, but it feels like this one has been landing, for people, and like the way that I'm hearing and seeing people describe the music and the lyrics and the artwork and the band is sort of like, wow, it felt like the communication was successful, because what people are saying in reply, or the faces, like when we're playing a concert and the way they're reacting, feels aligned with how we're feeling, in fact. And that's a different kind of thrill, you know.
I find it interesting how you say, during the first records and such, you didn't quite know how things were going to land.
Yeah.
And you said on Instagram about how, extra points for playing the record loud, but also just extra points for listening all the way through. I would say that, as you've alluded to, that your fan base is the sorts who are going to play it all the way through. They're going to repeat
Right,
listens, etc., etc. But there is a bit of a lost art with, listening
right.
to a record all the way through these days. It must be even scarier
Mm.
the way music is consumed now to be putting out a record because you don't know whether that's there. And
No, it's a very good question. I don't know if scared is quite what I feel. I feel something. It is definitely, it has a lot of impact. We don't ignore the fact that it's likely that songs will be heard not only in isolation, one track in mixed in with other tracks by other artists, but even only as fragments, oftentimes 15-second fragments on an Instagram story or less, And that is the way that the music is likely to be frequently heard. No, it does not scare us, but it is an extra challenge because you want to make music that will work in different contexts. In our own, like, you sort of idiosyncratic and self-taught, DIY way, we try to plan for that and we try to test for that. It's sort of like when like a mixing engineer, it's like, okay, let's mix the song. And I'm in a fancy control room with the most expensive speakers you've ever seen in your life. And like, okay, of course it sounds great, but now let's listen to it on the car stereo. Now let's listen to it through a phone. Let's listen to it in mono. Let's listen to it in a large club. I used to do that all the time with mixes. It's like, I remember we were working on La Isla Bonita, and I was doing all the mixes for that, and I was like, like we were on tour, and I was mixing on headphones in the car, in the front seat or whatever, plugged into the cigarette lighter, and like on headphones, it's like the clearest, driest possible audio. I'm like, okay, this mix sounds pretty clear. I can hear the bass, I can hear both guitars, I hear the hi-hat, whatever. Like this is working, I think. And then like we arrived early to some club one day. I was like, oh, let me just put on the mixes over the speakers. Our sound check is done and there's some dead time. I'm listening to it in this club and it's just this huge wash and I can't hear anything. And I'm like, oh no, back to the drawing board. And so you got to like, you realize like there are things that work in one context that totally fail in another context. And it's kind of just a matter of, for me, the only way I know, I don't think there's any shortcut. I think you kind of just have to do the homework and sort of test it here, test it there, test it there. And I mean, I'd play tricks on myself of like, I'd put an LP on the record player, take the needle, set it down on the first band, but then press play on our new mixes or whatever, and just to imagine what it would be like as an LP and listen through on the order. Oh, is this a good ending for side A? And just like, and then
That's clever.
other stuff that we didn't do in the early days, which is like play it for our friends and like how do they respond. That's always a big lesson, even if the friend says nothing. You always hear a lot of new stuff when you play it in front of someone whose opinion you respect. You're like, ooh, that part is kind of boring, or ooh, that's sort of cringe. I don't know. We just try and test it. So I'm not scared, but it's like it is a lot of work, but it's work I'm happy to be doing. But it's like it's very challenging, to make things that can work in different contexts. Now, caveat when I say work, I don't mean work like Taylor Swift, or Beyonce in terms of it's going to quote unquote work on Spotify and we're going to get 5 trillion plays and become zillionaires. I don't mean that. We have no illusion that that's ever going to happen with our music. But it's rather that it lands for us. If you hear the song, pick random song from Noble and Godlike in Ruin, but play some other track before it, then play our track, then play some other random track after it. Does it work? Does it sound embarrassing? Does it say what we want to say? Does it give off the vibes that we want to give off when placed in different contexts? One really funny thing that has happened to each of the four of us many times is that we all share the experience and it's so surreal. We'll walk sometimes into a restaurant or a cafe and be like, man, what's this music? Wow, it's weird, says some weird music. And then we all get like a little scared, like, wow, I think there's some band out there that like maybe is as good as us. And it like, and, wow, this band, whoever this is like doing something really weird. And then we listen closer for a little longer. We realize it's Deerhoof playing through the speakers. Yeah. And then that's like the perfect trick. The mental trick is like, what would it sound like to you if you didn't know it was you? Which is so hard to do when you're DIY because like I said earlier, you get so used to it that you can't hear it anymore. And it's like you have to trick yourself into what will it be like for a person hearing it the first time in some utterly random context. We love playing festivals too because it's like unlike our headlining shows, a lot of the people there have never heard of Deerhoof. They just walked by, or there's just like that's what's on the schedule now. And it's like an incredible test. Can you put it across to people who have no idea who you are? Does it work for the first time listener? Do they need to have played it loud all the way through at home first in order to enjoy the show? Or can we do something that speaks to people? All that kind of stuff is like, I mean, maybe it's a little scary, but it's like it's part of the challenge of it that we totally welcome, Not that I welcome Spotify. I mean, I think Spotify is total crap, but I welcome the idea of music being able to work in different contexts, different audiences, different demographics, different times of day, different moods that you're in. And it's like there's the idea of like wanting it to land for people. Like each time you listen to the song or the album, it strikes you a little bit differently. Oh, yesterday it sounded like a cheerful, happy song to me, but today I'm in a different mood and I actually think this is a really sad song. Or I realize this is a really angry song, And the kind of layers, and wanting to be able to hit multiple, you know what I mean? Layers of possible way that it might get heard, I guess.
I like the idea of Taylor Swift sat in the front seat of a car mixing a record with busted headphones. But
Yeah.
you are quite right about, that sort of thing. Like, I think similar to your latest record, the MJ Lenderman record, I swear the last track is like, a total like brrr, fall down the stairs, like, crashes
Right,
and like
yeah.
stuff like that. And we were listening to it in the car on the way back
Yeah,
from somewhere, and
yeah.
everyone was just like, hey, let's
Right.
let's move this on.
Right,
Uh,
yeah, fast
so you
forward.
really need to be, like
Right.
you say, in that sort of headspace. That's really interesting. And saying about Spotify as well, how's this for a segue? I liked how you premiered your immigrant song on
Yeah,
Craigslist or
yeah,
Craigslist,
exactly.
and that's like, to spotlight a platform that's not,
Right.
as you guys put it, blatantly supporting fascism. So how did that come about in terms of, coming up with that idea? And have you had like similar
Yeah.
ideas for pushing records and singles in the past or?
Well, it's one of the many ironies of what I think so many of us experience day to day is that our main source of information about the details of how big tech and oligarch owned tech is destroying life and destroying the human experience and destroying the planet. This information is discovered via the big tech platforms, So it was exactly that. I'm literally on Instagram and I see a post of somebody talking about some details behind the scenes about Craigslist and how this person donates so much of their money to this cause and that cause and their sort of regulations and bylaws prevent certain kinds of abuse that are run rampant, abuse and misinformation that are extremely incentivized on the big tech platforms, and that are the way that the big CEOs, in fact, make their money is mostly from abuse and habit forming qualities and from misinformation and sensationalism and destruction of attention span, etc. And I saw this thing about Craigslist, and I just sent it to all my bandmates and the people at Joyful Noise, the label that we're on. No comment, just sent it because I thought it was interesting, and I just sort of had a weird intuition that it was not formed, that maybe this could be relevant to us in some way because we had been talking for months, about, I mean, as you kind of are forced to. I mean, you can opt out of the conversation if you're a band, if you prefer to be hands off and just let the label decide everything. But basically, there are decisions to be made. Are you willing to put your songs in discovery mode on Spotify, which means that the incredibly minuscule rate of pay that you would normally get is reduced even more, but in theory, you're promised slightly better, an edge on the algorithm or something. Or it's like, oh, well, do we make a banner for Apple Music? Well, the rules are you have to film yourself like outside in the trees with the sun shining through the mottled light, or all this like incredibly specific, or it's like, well, should we shut down the Twitter? Not it's like I basically made a decision. I've been doing Twitter for 10 years, pretty heavily, and we had a lot of followers. But I mean, as soon as the Heil Hitler, happened, I'm like, forget it. That's it. That's our last tweet. And so basically, behind the scenes, every artist or their labels or managers, but in our case, we're very hands on, has to make every single one of those decisions. It was already a going conversation. So I just saw this thing about Craigslist. I sent it to everybody. Everybody got so excited. I was like, whoa, cool. And it's like, well, maybe, I forget whose idea it actually was. It might have been mine, or it might have been Jake Saunders at the label, or maybe both of us simultaneously. It was like, well, is there a way we could actually premiere the song, on Craigslist, just as a kind of like middle finger and a kind of a joke, but also, a joke with a little bit of a serious point to it. It just was like a testament to the sort of adventurous, very game kind of spirit of the people at Joyful Noise, that they just like heard it and instantly wanted to run with it. And like, we're immediately researching like, okay, what are the rules and what category should we put it in? And oh, it's going to get flagged if we do this. And they tried experiments and all this stuff. And so it totally worked. For all I know, those ads might still be up. We were very worried they were going to get taken down within 5 minutes, but it totally worked. And it was a fun way to release a song. I don't know. It's fun to be creative, not only with like your chord progression or your drum beat or your EQ setting, but like you can be creative, and people frequently are very creative, and I think it's fun, creative with, I don't know, just how to present what you're doing, because there's an infinity of ways, and we're told that there are these proper channels, and there's sort of, the few times in Deerhoof's 31 years in which we have hired sort of like publicity companies or kind of like agencies with like this amazing roster, and like, oh, the White Stripes are on this, and oh, we did the publicity for A, B, and Z, and it's like, oh, they're gonna do great things for us. But it's like, it's amazing how this status quo mindset can completely enslave the sort of music industry professional who wants to keep their job and who has too many artists on their roster and doesn't really have a lot of time to give inordinate amounts of creative thought to each one. It's just sort of like a cookie cutter approach. And it's just like they would just give us advice, and we'd just be like, that might work for the White Stripes. It's not going to work for Deerhoof. It's going to be really cornball. I mean, the most obvious examples are always things like Google wants to pay you $20,000 to have your song in an ad, or this bank, or something. After I remember after the 2008 crash, some bank was trying to clean up their image, you know what I'm saying? Wall Street, and they wanted to use some Deerhoof track in their thing, and they're just like, sorry, I don't care what the payday is, because it's not just that we have a ethical point of view about it. It's also like, are you a complete fool? This will destroy the band. No one will ever trust us again. And we have, for better or worse, developed a reputation for having certain kind of anti-corporate principles and anti-fascist principle, pro-animal principles. It's just kind of what the band's about from day one. I mean, a lot of it was the guy who started the band, this guy Rob, and it's like he sort of set the tone and set the ethos, and we believe in it. And it's just like, if you just go for the payday, it's just like, okay, but now your band's over because nobody believes a word that comes out of your mouth anymore. So I don't know. I forget what your question was. I'm rambling. What was your question? I
I
I swear it was relevant.
it was definitely
Oh, the
relevant.
Craigslist thing. The
Yeah,
Craigslist. Yeah, yeah, exactly.
I know there are different, like you say, there's different ways of doing things,
Right.
and not every new band has to come out and immediately sign up to all the socials and boost posts and all that bollocks. But
Totally. Yeah.
are you quite happy that, you at least had kind of that room to breathe before, like you say, the dot-com era and all that, rather than have to spin plates so much like people these days?
Happy is a pretty good word. It's not specific enough. I mean, joy is not exactly what I feel at, for instance, the fact that younger bands did not have that wiggle room. I mean, if I were a dog eat dog competitor, I would say, like, ha ha, screw you. Well, we got lucky because we started sooner. But the reality is, it's very depressing, to see the state of like people who start doing music because of their love of creation and their love of sound and their delight at their own imagination and their own abilities that surprise themselves, and they want to do it more, it's interactive and it's social and it's magical and it's all the things, that that music always has been. And now it's just instantly turned into a meat grinder, where it's like the definition of music, like whatever music was defined as for the previous 300,000 years of human history, has now been flushed down the toilet by a guy called Daniel Ek, who has redefined music as a thing that you're trying to get plays on this one billionaire's platform, where he gives his money to defense contractors and stuff. It's like, that's it. And he just like walks into a room in some kind of like tech conference and says, well, this is what music is now, and musicians, they have to catch up. He's unusually obnoxious about it, and not everyone is so overt, but he speaks out loud for an ethos that is industry wide. The definition of music is extraordinarily narrow and has nothing whatsoever to do with self discovery, with the magic of surprising yourselves in a small group of friends. What that feels like when you create something that you've never heard before and you didn't know you could do. I mean, just all the experiences in the process of being a musician that only a musician knows how indescribable they can feel. Peak experiences, things that make you understand why you're on this earth, what it is to be a Homo sapiens, all just instantly eradicated by a machine that is just hungry for more disposable, content that is instantly replaceable the second you start throwing your shoes into the wheels of progress and want to slow down in any way or do anything even slightly off message or outside the box. Everything has to fit into a box. Upload here, press click, title goes here, can't be more than this number of characters, all that stuff. We ran into that with one of our records called Love Lore. Love Lore 4, track 4 on that album. There were too many characters to fit on Bandcamp or Spotify or whatever it was, because it was the names of all the artists that we covered in this medley, and the medley was really long and it went on too long. Just, obviously a frivolous example, but I'm just saying, it's like the fact that we did have an experience beginning in the 90s. I feel so lucky, so grateful. And if our same band were to start today in 2025 and come out either with The Man, the King, the Girl, our first CD, or come out with Noble and Godlike in Ruin, there is no way on earth either one would do anything but instantly plummet into oblivion. And we know that. And we know that we have an advantage because we've been around for a while. And we sit there and just are grateful every day. To us, it's staggering. We can't believe that we come back to San Francisco and can play 2 nights at this venue and people still come, and it's like it still sells out, and people are like there singing along, and it's just like, how is this possible? Like, we are the luckiest people on earth. But happy, it's more complicated than happy. It's just we know that we've dodged a bullet a million times. There's just so many obstacles and landmines and tests that an artist is normally put through. I mean, honestly, I saw an article recently where someone had done a study of suicide rates and how one of the lines of work where it is highest is musician. And in a way, it's not that surprising when you think about it. But it's like basically it's dangerous. It's
Hmm.
dangerous to pursue a career in music. It will endanger your life, you know?
Speaking of bleak, Greg, I hate to cut across you, but I don't want to give
Less than a minute, less than a minute.
I don't want to give Zoom any more money. Uh, but no,
No, we covered it. We covered it.
it was a pleasure to chat to you, man. I'm glad we got to sort it in the end.
Thank you so much for the questions.
Oh, pleasure, man. It was great talking to you. Okay.
Yeah, you too. Let me know when it comes out.
Let's do a part two and a part three
Okay, right
sometime.
on. Yeah, count me in. Thank you
Cheers,
so
man.
much.